recently I took a bunch of heat for publicly declaring my disdain for deadlifts, clean and jerk, and snatch range of motions in the gym. And I wanted to take this time here on our Coach Robb channel on YouTube to elaborate what I meant by that. I want you to stop and think about the fundamental movements associated with a deadlift. You've got your lower back is being bent over at a certain amount of degrees depending on your height. You've got your arms hanging directly below you, and then you have this, let's call it a large amount of weight that's attached to your wrist. Now I want you to stop and think about this just from an angle standpoint. Why is it that I'm not a big fan of deadlifts? Let's just talk about that for just a moment. And that's because once the body is bent over at an angle, and now you put this weight at the bottom of your arms, I think you guys are all comfortable with the idea that you have these discs that lay in between each vertebrae. If you look at the screen, you'll notice that we have these discs, and the discs are sitting in between a vertebrae that is what? Sitting up and down. Your head is directly over your spine, and that keeps the discs from not having a risk of slipping. We've all heard the word a slipped disc. Now let's go back and look at the range of motion of a deadlift from the side. You've got weight hanging down at the bottom of your arm. At the same time, you have your spine is bent over. Now, before anybody gets all hot and starts smoking the keyboard and leaving comments below, let's have an adult conversation about this. I've been a physiologist at the time of this recording for 38 years. Do I understand the posterior chain, the kinetic chain associated with deadlifts, snatches, clean and jerk? Yes, I totally get it. Here's where I have such a problem with it, and that's why I do not encourage my athletes to do it, is because unfortunately, unless you're under the tutelage of somebody that's a very highly qualified functional movement specialist, I don't know that you have the fundamental range of motion to do it without load, much less with load and movement. Like I said, if you're fortunate enough that you can go and get underneath the direct supervision of a strength and conditioning coach who has an extensive background on functional movement. I'll give you a perfect example. Put this video on pause, and what I want you to do is I want you to put your 2 feet together, lock your knees out, and see if you can bend over and put your palms all the way down on the ground. Along the way, you might notice that you have some limitations. What we always say in the physiology world is that should stretch your hamstrings, but what if you feel tightness in your shoulder blades? Notice I didn't say low back, shoulder blades. Tells me that your shoulder muscles are tighter than your hamstrings. What if you go to bend over and you can't get your palms flat on the ground, but you do feel a little bit of tightness in your lower back? Lower back is tighter than your hamstrings. When you get with a good massage therapist or a good physical therapist or a good strength and conditioning coach or a movement specialist, they're going to do functional assessments. Why? Because if you add load with movement, the risk of injury is just astronomical. Now, I don't want to gloat in the fact that people get hurt doing this just to be proven right. That is not what the intention of this video is. However, doing this for as many years as I have, and you see somebody that gets on my massage table and they're complaining that they've got a low back injury. Notice I use the word injury. They've ended up going to an orthopedic surgeon and now they've got a slipped disc. They've got a herniated disc. And you ask them how'd they do it. Now, I'm not throwing the deadlift or the clean and jerk or the snatch or any of those types of movements all under the bus. Sometimes it's you try to pick up a heavy brick or you picked up something. You have a very, very tight lower back. Maybe you have tight hamstrings, tight quads because they all work together. And then you bent over to pick it up and just that angle with that load on your arms was just enough to cause the disc to blow. That's why, like whenever I'm having my athletes do anything relevant to strength work, our number one goal is to make sure that we have fundamental movement first before we add any load, before we add any speed of movement. And I want to encourage you. Obviously here on my Coach Robb YouTube channel, I'm putting more and more videos out on soft tissue, strength training, only because I don't want you guys to get hurt. Yes, I totally understand. If you're in a sport that requires a lot of raw power, you have to get physically strong. But please don't try to get physically strong at the expense of your long-term health. How many times, and you guys have to be honest with yourselves, how many people do you know hurt themselves in the gym? How ironic is that? So we want to avoid that through knowledge. That's why these videos are put together. The question comes in. I talk about it on a podcast. I talk about it on a public podcast that I don't, maybe it's not the Coach Robb podcast, but something I'm a guest on. Please keep the context of the conversation relevant. If you don't have fundamental movement, please work on that first and foremost. Remember what we've talked about. You want anatomical neutrality. Every joint should go to anatomical neutral because that takes the tension out of the muscle. A muscle only attaches to bone. So if the muscle's hypertonic, super tight, it's going to just pop that bone, especially when we start getting into the vertebrae, right? If you look at the screen right now, see how all these muscles attach to the, if you look at the back of the spine, that's going to be the spinous process, and the ones on the side are called the transverse processes. Look at all the muscles that attach to those. So do you see my concern? If you already have tight muscles and you're putting your body into an anatomical position where those muscles will pull on the vertebrae, it's all a game of leverage. And next thing you know, the disc gets squirted out the side, the disc gets jeopardized, it gets ruptured, whatever the title is that goes with it. All that matters for you is that you're injured and you may require surgery to get back to it. All because you didn't start with functional movement. Somebody that considers themselves a strength and conditioning expert is telling you that you should do these things without really understanding if you're capable of doing it in a healthy, safe, sustainable manner. I'm not trying to be the internet police here. I just have seen so many people report themselves to myself in our various wellness clinics, and they're getting hurt because somebody said, oh, this is the must-do exercise, without doing a little bit of background. So before you do anything that requires a lot of raw power, again, I'm going to go back to the clean and jerk, the deadlift, the snatch, please get with a massage therapist. There's functional stretching specialists that are out there, physical therapists. Get with a strength and conditioning coach that knows what they're talking about. And each sport has those people that really know what they're doing, and they're worth every penny. So please go see them. Thank you so much for this question. If you happen to have a question, please feel free to send it to me and my team. contact@coachrobb.com. The number of questions that come in on a daily basis, continues to escalate. I want to say thank you for that. Thank you for the time watching this video today, and we look forward to seeing you again tomorrow.